Well, as always, it's fantastic to be back at KT. I've become more and more regular at KT. I love coming back every time I can. It's a real privilege to be amongst you. It's good to see so many of you come back after last week. I'm not surprised. People love hearing Jay speak. He sends his apologies for today. He had another engagement for tonight, so he can't be here. But he sent me in his place, and my job is to talk to you about engaging with Muslims and engaging with Islam. And it struck me that some people say, well, what's all this? What's so special about Islam? What's so special about Muslims? What's all this talk about them? Why do we worry? I'm an evangelist. I go to church at Kensington Temple, you may say to yourselves. I'm an evangelist. I'll talk to anybody about the Lord Jesus. I don't mind who I'm talking to. I sit on a bus and I talk to the person beside me. I fulfill the Great Commission in Matthew 28, taking the gospel to all people, so I don't mind who I take it to. So I'll talk to the lady on the bus and she's an atheist, or I'll talk to my workmate who's a Hindu. I don't mind. Why do all this talk and fuss about Islam? They're the same as everybody else. I just want to give them the gospel. I want to tell them about Jesus and I want to see them converted. That's what Jesus told us to do, and that's what I want to do. And you will hear people say that. You'll hear people say that. Don't need to know anything about it at all. I don't need to know anything about Islam or about Hinduism or so on. I will just tell them about Jesus. And that's a good starting point, may I just say. That's a very good starting point. Just actually, what I want to do is tell the whole world about Jesus. But there's far more to it than that. And specifically, with Islam, there's far more to it than that. You see, with Islam, in many ways, it's quite unique as a religion. Firstly, Islam won't leave Christianity alone. If you're a Christian, Islam will not leave you alone. Now, Buddhism, they don't worry. They get on with their particular religion and they don't fuss that you're a Christian, okay? I guess if you're a Sikh, they don't fuss about it either. They get on with their Sikhism, and Hindus get on with their Hinduism. But with Islam, it's very different. It's not like that at all. You see, they claim that one of their prophets in Islam is our Savior, Jesus. Now, he's not the top prophet. The top prophet is, of course, Muhammad. He's the prophet, the final prophet, according to Islam, and he's the top of the pile. But somewhere down, I think he's number 6 or 7 or someone, comes Jesus. And you'll often hear it, won't you, when you're talking to Muslims, they'll say, we have a real respect for Jesus. They try to engage with you and say, look, please understand, we have a real respect for Jesus. We really like Jesus. He's one of our prophets. But of course, what they're actually doing by doing that is they are dethroning Jesus. They are diminishing Jesus. They're saying to you and to me, and they're saying to everybody else they talk to, we have a Jesus, but we've got the real Jesus, and he's just a prophet. But you and I say, he is a prophet, but he's also the Savior of the world. He's also the Son of God. It's a little bit as if they're saying, as you know, the Queen is married to the Duke of Edinburgh, okay? But her title is Her Majesty the Queen of England, United Kingdom, Commonwealth countries, etc., etc. She's got that title. She's the Queen of the lot. But along come the Muslims, and they don't refer to her as the Queen. They say she's the Mrs. Duke of Edinburgh. She's the Duchess of Edinburgh. They dethrone her. They reduce her. You get my point on this? And that is what Islam does. So they won't actually leave your religion alone, your Christianity alone. They take your Savior and my Savior, and they diminish him, they reduce him, they degrade him, and they make him just a prophet in Islam, somewhere down below Muhammad. Furthermore, they take over more of our religion than that. You see, what they say is that Jesus was actually a Muslim. They say that David was a Muslim. They say that Noah was a Muslim. They say that Moses was a Muslim. They say that Adam was a Muslim. In fact, all our prophets, the Jewish prophets that we follow from the Old Testament, right the way through to John the Baptist and Jesus, they're all actually Muslims. Now, they didn't know they were Muslims. They thought they were the children of Israel, but that doesn't matter. To Islam, that doesn't matter. So they're not only taking our Savior and diminishing him down so that Jesus is just an Islamic prophet, but they're actually taking various of our Old Testament prophets, and they're saying, really, they're all Muslims. So do you get my point? They are not leaving your religion and my religion, your faith and my faith alone. You cannot ignore it because they're out on the streets telling people about our religion. So we can't get away from it. And not only that, did you know that actually, according to Orthodox Islam, you were born a Muslim? Did you know that? Everybody is born a Muslim. That's the original state of people. And what happens is, unfortunately for you, you're brought up in a Christian family, or the Christians that Christianized society or an atheist society or whatever. Unfortunately, you were led away from that which you were born into. But they say that everybody was actually born a Muslim. And that's why you quite often hear people who become Muslims, they don't refer to them as converts to Islam. They refer to themselves as reverts to Islam. They're reverting back to what they're originally born as. Do you get my point? So you can say to yourself, I don't really mind what Islam teaches. I just want to talk to the person on the next door neighbor. But please understand, they're not leaving your faith, your Christian faith, they're not leaving Jesus alone. They're diminishing him, they're degrading him, and they're degrading your faith as well, and mine too. So that's a really good reason for actually to get to understand Islam and to engage with Islam because of that. But there's more than that. We're going to be finding out tonight that Islam it won't actually leave society alone. Uniquely, and we're going to talk more about this in a moment, but uniquely, Islam is a political religion. Okay? Islam is a political religion. It believes in expanding and taking over territory. So in other words, our society here is target for political Islam. Where you live, you and I are citizens in this society here in Britain, is a target for political Islam. I don't mean that's necessarily hostile. I don't mean they're going to go out there with guns and swords and take it over. But their job, as good Muslims, is to turn the society in which they live into an Islamic society, into an Islamic state. They want, for instance, and the opinion polls show it, something like 40% of Muslims think that Sharia law should be reigning, should be the legal system here in the United Kingdom. Not our existing legal system. It should be Sharia. We're going to talk a bit more about that in a few minutes' time, but they won't leave you alone, they won't leave your faith alone, and they won't leave your society alone either. And that's why Islam is rather unique. It's unlike Sikhs, or Buddhists, or Hindus, or anybody else, any other religion. They want to change your religion, they want to change your society, and mine too. And that is why I don't think we can validly say, well, we don't really mind about it, we're not going to worry about Islam, actually we're just going to get on with our lives, we're going to tell everybody we can about Jesus and let the Holy Spirit do his work. There's a real truth in that, but it isn't sufficient. Now, before we go any further, I just want to draw your attention to three basic ideas that are really important as we look at Islam, as we began to look at it last week, as we look at it this week, and in these series of sessions that we've got on. Okay? This is really important. The first one is, you will know, don't you, we have an expression in Christianity, in the Christian faith, we love the sinner, but we hate the sin. You heard that expression? It comes from the idea that actually in Christianity you love your neighbor. Indeed, more than that, Jesus threw down the challenge, you love your enemy. So when it comes to people, your job is to love them no matter who they are. Your job is to love every Muslim, every atheist, every Hindu, every Christian, everybody else. Your job as a follower of Jesus is to love. But this is actually very liberating for us. So we have this difference between the person, on the one hand, and their sin on the other. We also have the difference between the Muslim and Islam. Now remember this, it's really important this. It is provided you love your Muslim, you love whatever Muslim you see, no matter the one you work beside at work or you meet on the bus or wherever you come into contact with them. Whoever they are and wherever they are, your job as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus, is you must love that person. That also gives you freedom to criticize, critique, hate, if you like, their religion. Their religion, as we'll find out today and in future sessions as well, has very, very dark parts to it. But you're actually all right, provided you can critique it and you can confront it and you can challenge it, provided you make sure at all times you are respecting and loving the Muslims themselves. Now, of course, Muslims don't see it quite like that. You criticize Muhammad or you criticize Allah, you're criticizing me. And you know very well if people do cartoons of Muhammad, there can be riots all over the Middle East, okay? But I have to say, that isn't like that in our society. People are allowed to criticize, critique the religion, the faith, the ideology. We have freedom of speech. We have freedom of ideas. We have a free marketplace of them. And that gives us a real freedom, provided you love your Muslim neighbor. You can critique his or her religion as much as you like and challenge it and confront it. And that's what we're doing today. You'll have heard time and time again from Jay, those of you that follow him and see him, he loves the Muslims. He calls them his friends. He likes them personally. But there is nobody with a more devastating critique of Islam than Jay. And that's something you can follow, something you can emulate. You love the sinner, you hate the sin. You love the Muslim, and you can critique, challenge, confront, even hate Islam. And that's okay. That's the first principle, okay? Everybody following me so far? This okay? Okay, good. That's the first one. I like it to see some of you taking notes. That's good. The second thing I want to say is this, that Islam is unique, and this is a sort of background point before we really get going. Islam is unique. It is both, and this, I've referred to this a bit beforehand, but this is really important. It's unique. I know all religions are unique, aren't they? But this is unique in a particular way that's really, really important. Islam is unique in being both a missionary religion, like Christianity, but also being a political religion as well, unlike Christianity in its essence, okay? Now, let me just explain. Sikhism is not a mission religion. You're born to be a Sikh. You don't find Sikhs out on the street evangelizing and doing that. Similarly with Judaism, Jews don't evangelize. You're born a Jew or you're not born a Jew. Similarly with Hinduism to a large extent, although people do convert to it, but it's bound to India and the Indian subcontinent around that. But both Christianity and Islam are missionary religions. They want people to convert. But the difference is Christianity is not political. Christianity is not territorial. Okay? We have that saying, don't we, in the New Testament? The kingdom of God is within you. It's a spiritual religion. It's after Christianity is after, by the Holy Spirit, is after your heart. It's after persuading you. Jesus died on the cross in order to persuade you to follow him. Okay? Not so with Islam. And like all these things, if you want a proof of this particular point, you go back to the foundations. You go back to Muhammad. And did you know Muhammad? Muhammad started his ministry in 610 AD. He started in Mecca. And for 12 years, he went around preaching what he understood to be revelations from Allah. He's preaching them to people there. Many didn't accept it. And in many ways, he was persecuted, he was harassed, he was attacked, and so on. In many ways, he was a sort of Gandhi figure. And Martin Luther King turned the other cheek, perhaps almost a bit like Jesus when he was in Mecca. Jesus, too, was persecuted. Jesus was taken and put up on the cross. But Muhammad was not like that. Muhammad didn't do that. He got so fed up with the persecution. After 12 years, he tried banging his head against a brick wall in Mecca, that many of you will know. He then left Mecca and went to Medina. And in Medina, we see a very, very different Muhammad. From being a prayer leader and a spiritual man who's castigated and persecuted in Mecca, he becomes not only a preacher, but he becomes a governor. He becomes a top man. He becomes a politician. He also becomes a military man. He becomes a general in the army. Suddenly, you find this man who was a Gandhi figure, almost a Jesus figure in Mecca, has transformed himself. And the reason why this is so important for you and I to understand, and why Islam is such a different religion, is that move from Mecca to Medina, that move in 622 AD, 622, that's the start of the Islamic calendar. That is year zero for Islam. So really what they're saying is this change from the quiet, passive, persecuted Muhammad in Mecca to the strong governor, the man of arms, the man of warfare, the man who himself was involved in 29 battles. And indeed, incidentally, if you go to the Topkapi Museum in Istanbul, they have there two of his swords. Where will you find Jesus' sword? Anybody know? No, you won't. Of course you won't, because Jesus never used the sword. Muhammad did. He fought himself personally in battles. So we have a very different person. And that is why, that is the foundation of Islam, and that is why Islam is so different from Christianity. Islam is territorial. Muhammad took over Medina. He governed Medina. When necessary, he went to war, and he fought in battles in Medina, and he carried on doing so until he died. So Islam is a territorial religion. And interestingly enough, as you'll find out as time goes on, once Muhammad died, Islam spread very, very fast, right the way across to Spain in the west, and right the way across to India. In 100 years, it had taken over all huge territory. But of course, it took it over by the sword. It didn't necessarily convert people by the sword, but it took over the territory, very territorial. And these were victories for Islam, as their armies marched from left, right, and center. And they took over huge territory. The interesting thing is, if you compare that with Christianity, is people have calculated that in Christianity took over, impacted society. It took them 300 years in Christianity, from the death of Christ, to take over, if that's the right word, to impact the same quantity of territory. But of course, Christianity did it by preaching, by prayer, by miracles, and by persuasion, okay? And it didn't take over the territory, it just individuals converted. Christianity didn't become political in any way at all until, some of you will know about Emperor Constantine in 310, I think it was, AD. But for all those 300 years, the gossiping the gospel, the taking the gospel out, the work of the Holy Spirit, and Christianity expanded more slowly than Islam, 600 years later, but it expanded, and so on. So it's really important you get this difference between Christianity and Islam, and how different they are. My last point that I'm going to look at now, and time is going on very fast, isn't it, really? When we look at the Islam in the United Kingdom, you'll generally find there are two views. You'll know as well as I do, and we're going to look at this in a minute, we're going to look at some PowerPoints, you're going to see the rise of Islam. You know it anyway, the increasing numbers, over 2 million Muslims now, and how different areas of society are becoming more and more Islamized. How do you respond to this growth of Islam? Now, at the one end, there are what I call the happy optimists, the multiculturalists, and they say, look, don't worry about it. When Muslims come here, they come here by they're born into Muslim families, and as you'll know, Muslim families have many more children than most other demographics. People, either when they're born here or when they immigrate here from South Asia and the Middle East and elsewhere, they soon assimilate in. They soon become like us. The size of their families begins to diminish. Their orientation and their interest becomes rather Western. They begin to think about the holidays they'd like, and the clothes they want to wear, and the music they'd like to listen to. And they would say, multicultural, these happy optimists will say, don't worry about it. They will in due course assimilate. We'll have some bumps along the road. Well, the things will be a bit tougher from time to time. We've got ISIS at the moment over in the Middle East, and maybe a few bombs will go off around the place. But in due course, everything will quieten down. And I have to say, there is some evidence for that side of the argument. First, the historical evidence. If you go back 400 years, in some ways, the Catholics here in this society were in a very similar position. The Catholics identified with and took their orders from somebody abroad, i.e. the Pope, and that Pope was then hostile to the United Kingdom and to England specifically, go back 400 years. And many people, who here knows about the gunpowder plot, Guy Fawkes? Okay, you know about that? Okay, November the 5th, yeah? Okay, we'll still celebrate it today. And some people will say that November the 5th, when extreme Catholics tried to blow up the Parliament, they failed, but they tried to blow up Parliament, but they were absolutely antagonistic towards Protestant English society and the king and so on. They tried to blow up. That is exact equivalent to 9/11, except in 9/11 they succeeded in bringing down the Twin Towers. And so some people look at it and say, don't worry, look what's happened to the Catholics. In due course, they've assimilated, they're loyal, they become good as citizens as anybody else here in the UK. It may have taken a few hundred years, but that's what they've done. And people will say that's what, the happy optimists will say that's what's going to happen to Islam. Okay? And that's at one end, that's on one side. Okay? On the other side are those that say, no, this is nothing of the sort. Values of Islam are absolutely in contradistinction to the values of the West. They're hostile to them, and there is a clash of civilizations. Have you heard that expression, clash of civilizations? So over this side, you've got those that say the clash of civilization people. They would say they're more realistic. And they would say that the two are going to, along the continuum between, on the one hand, the happy optimists who think, actually, just relax. Let Islam, it'll assimilate Muslims, will become the same as you and me, as British citizens and UK citizens, to those that say, no, the values of Islam are so antithetical, so distinct, so different. And not only that, but Muslims are taught, Orthodox Muslims are taught in many areas not to mix with non-Muslims. So the wall of separation between them and the rest of society grows and grows. That's where the clash of civilization is. And the question for you tonight, and as you listen to Jay next week and so on, is to decide for yourself, where do you think you come along that continuum? That's the society, but that's the question for our society. Are you a happy optimist that think, oh, don't worry about it? And there are lots of politicians out there that get very close to that position. Or are you one of those that says, actually, the values of Islam are completely opposite to, antithetical to, the values of our society here, and therefore there is a clash of civilization, and in due course there will be blood on the streets? That's the question for you today, and for you and to me. Now, those are all the backdrop questions I want, if I can put it like that, the backdrop questions for you. Firstly, remember that we love the sinner. We hate the sin. Under all circumstances, we love Muslims, okay? Even if we confront, challenge, or even hate Islam. Secondly, that Islam is a political religion, okay? It's a political religion. It wants to take over territory. It wants to govern territory, unlike Christianity. Christianity intrinsically doesn't. Jesus isn't interested in territory. He's interested in hearts. The kingdom of God is within you. And thirdly, this continuum from, on the one hand, the happy optimists who think, just let it all happen and the Muslims will integrate in due course, right through, on the other hand, the clash of civilizations, and there's going to be, ultimately, there'll be blood on the streets. And you'll hear both views around out there, and you yourself will need to make up your own mind about where you think you are along this. But wherever you are along this continuum, unless you're right at this end to say, basically says, let it all hang out, don't worry about it, and that. If you're anywhere else but for that extreme end, your job and my job is to challenge Islam. Parts of it, not all of it. Parts of it is perfectly acceptable. The outworking of Islam is perfectly acceptable. Muslims are taught not to steal, okay? That's part of what it is. So they're not supposed to steal. So that's okay. They have other ethical things which we can agree with ourselves. But there are aspects of Islam, we're going to be looking at that in a moment, which are completely unacceptable. And we will need to challenge it. So whether you're actually right at this end, bang, 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 which eyeball to eyeball, or whether you're somewhere along the middle, all the way along here, this spectrum here, you and I need to be looking for those aspects of Islam, which is rising, more than anything else, rising in our society, rising around our churches, and saying we need to challenge various aspects of it. Now, I'm just going to show a quick PowerPoint. Time's getting on very quickly, isn't it? I'm going to show a quick PowerPoint. I'm going to whip through it quite quickly here. Together with Peter McElvenna, many of you know here, he and I run a roadshow. We go around churches, and it's called Can We Talk About Islam? And I'm going to take some of the points that we use that just to show some of the markers to how rapidly Islam is rising within our society. I'm going to cut it quite short because time's getting on, and there are some other aspects that I want to show you as well, okay? So let's just go through this here, if we may, please. I'm just going to move on. Yeah, can we talk? That's our roadshow. I'll go through that. So Islam in Britain today. Okay, Islam is the dominant religion in Britain in 10 years. That's the forecast. It will be the dominant religion in Britain in 10 years. It's growing so fast. This is quite important. 1 in 10 under 25s are Muslim. 1 in 10 are Muslim. That's 20%. 10% are Muslim. Sharia, we're going to talk a bit about this in a few minutes' time, but Sharia courts, 85, at least 85 in this country, already operating. There are some not far from us here in London. Muslim grooming gangs, the police have become politically correct. We are now a world leader in Islamic finance. I don't know if you knew that. The City of London is now, and we'll come back to this in a few minutes' time, but the City of London is now a world leader in Islamic finance. I'll move on, except the comment down the bottom. The opinion polls show that a high percentage of Muslims in the UK are sympathetic to ISIS, which is a bit of a worry. Long-term projection of Christian Muslim share of the population. As you'll see, it shows there that in due course by 2070, at the moment, there are more Christians than Muslims in the world, but according at least to this particular one, which is some projections by some organizations there, by 2070, Muslims will have grown faster than Christians, and they will be the larger religion of the two. I will say to you, that's what we're putting up, and that is a perfectly respectable forecast, but I have seen other forecasts which show that while demographic birth rate of Muslims is higher than Christians, it's not that much higher, because in Africa, South America, Asia, Christians too have large families, and they're growing. But the significant thing I've seen is that people are converting to Christianity far more than they're converting to Islam. So the forecast I have seen is that in the foreseeable future, over the next 100, 150 years, if projections continue as they are at the moment, Islam will never catch Christianity because of the rate of conversions. But, you know, this is just forecast. It's giving a warning. This is perfectly respectable forecast here. It lets you know that Islam is growing, and it's growing and growing fast. Okay? I think some of you saw this last week because Jay showed it. He nicked it off our off us from last week. In the UK, the top boy's name in 2014 was not Jack or John or anything else. It was Muhammad. And also, if you look on the right-hand side here, just over here, UK population Muslim. Well, in Bradford, the Muslim population is 25%. And look down the bottom there, in London, it's 12%. So the UK population, Muslim population, is growing rapidly. I won't bother to look at that one, multiplying minarets. Here we have Islam in London. This shows the Muslim population. I'm quite interested, because I'll be talking a bit later about living in a Muslim area. And as it happens, as you see there, the most intensely Muslim area in the whole of London, not Bradford, this is London, is Green Street West, with over 50% of the population there are Muslim. That's where I live, right there in Green Street West in Newham, in the East End of London. I'll be talking a bit more about that, more about that later on. But this shows you how the Muslim population is spread right away across London, and how intense it is, especially in the East End of London, where it's very dark in Newham and Tower Hamlets and so on, are there, very rapidly growing. This is a big question. A big question which keeps coming through. What is true Islam? And we're hoping that by the end of this series, when I think Jay's got 4 sessions with you after this, by the end of this series, you'll make up your mind about what you think about Islam. On the one hand, you see the very violent Islam, don't you? And there's the picture there on the left-hand side. That's ISIS beheading Christians, Coptic Christians there. That's the violent one. On the other hand, on the right-hand side here, you've got peaceful Islam, quiet Islam, prayerful Islam, pietistic Islam. Which is the real Islam? Okay, that's the big question we need to know. And that will feed into the question about whether we're going to be happy optimists or clash of civilizationists. The question for you. Okay. Spread of ISIS, I'll leave that one. Their 5-year plan, I think I'll leave that for the moment. I think we had that last week as well. Sharia law. We're going to talk a bit about Sharia law later on as time goes on. But Sharia law is the moral code and religious law of Islam. It covers every area of life, both public and private. It's derived from the Qur'an, Hadith, and scholars. And as we'll see in a few minutes' time, a man's testimony is worth twice that of a woman, and a Muslim's is worth twice that of a non-Muslim. And parallel legal system, we'll talk a bit about that. I'll leave that. The punishments, well, we know about that. Sharia finance, I think I'll leave that one out because time's getting on. But this is worth noting, this one here, with David Cameron, the Prime Minister. And he addressed the 9th World Islamic Economic Forum, which was held in London in 2013. And that's the first time that forum has been held outside the Islamic world. It was held here in London. And the Prime Minister said, already London is the biggest centre for Islamic finance outside the Islamic world, and today our ambition is to go further still. Because I don't just want London to be a great capital of Islamic finance in the Western world. I want London to stand alongside Dubai as one of the great capitals of Islamic finance anywhere in the world. I think because time is going on, this is Arab money buying up Britain, and so much of the London property market now is coming from Arab money. And they're taking it out and you can see all these different landmarks with huge amounts of Arab finance. And this is quite the stunning one. I think Jay showed this last week. The Qatari royal family now own more property in the UK than the Crown Estate than the Queen. Work that one out. That's how far we have got. The Qatari royal family, Arab, now own more property in the United Kingdom than the Queen herself, than the Crown Estates. That's how fast things have moved, and that's the impact of Islam that we have here. I think I'll hold that there. I think perhaps we can we'll take that off if we can go back onto the backdrop. So we've got the rise of Islam. We've got the rise of this religion, which is very different from our own, and it's impacting all areas of our lives. And we need to decide what we're going to do about it. Now, I'm going to talk for a few minutes now, and I'm going to show a video to you of a particular area. Many of you know this, a particular area. What I want to do in the time left to us in this particular hour is I want to talk to you about the mega-mosque campaign, which many of you know about. You here at Kensington Temple have been praying about this and been aware of this for some time. I want to talk about Sharia courts themselves. We mentioned there about Sharia. And then I'm going to talk, at this time, I want to talk about living in a Muslim area. Okay? You all with me so far? Okay, good, lovely. Okay, now engaging with Islam. This was my first, here we had this rising religion. It's all around us, impacting us all around us. What are we going to do about it? And my first, many of you will know this, but my first, I knew no more about Islam than anybody else. I'd read about it in the papers and and so on and so forth, and I was concerned about 9/11 and all this sort of business. I really didn't know much about it until 2005. And on the 27th of November, in 2005, the Sunday Times ran a huge article, a front-page article, saying, biggest mosque in Europe to be built in Newham, just about a mile from my front door. Biggest mosque. It was going to have a capacity of between 40 and 75,000. Between 40 and 75,000. So it can be bigger than most football stadiums. Significantly bigger than most football stadiums. The one near me, with the West Ham United football ground on Green Street in the East End of London, the current one anyway, takes 35,000. So it could be much, much bigger than that, and that was the plan. So I got a phone call from your senior minister here soon after that. He said, Alan, you live near it. You're a local councillor. Well, a local councillor is involved in a local authority there. You're a local councillor there. It's the lowest form of political life, but I was a local councillor. What are you going to do about it? And we talked about this over the phone. And as we talked and as we discussed it and as we looked at the thing, it dawned on me it was something that God was laying on my heart. That this hostile, and I'll explain that a bit more in a moment, this hostile monument to a very hardline, fundamentalist, separatist, isolationist Islam was wanted to put this huge platform to propagate its Islam and to do so very close to the 2012 Olympic Stadium that was then in the process of being built. So it was that conversation with your senior minister over the phone that really got me engaged with this. And we started to run a campaign. First of all, what I did was for 6 months, I just investigated. I researched. I looked at it. I wanted to know the truth. I'm a Christian. I need to know the fact. I need to know the truth about it. So we researched and researched this into this campaign. And then we started, with one or two other friends of mine, we started a campaign. We put out a press release. And suddenly the press picked it up, and the BBC television picked it up, and it was all over. It was in July 2006. It was all over the BBC, all over the newspapers, and so on. Now, I've done a video about this, which we're going to show in a moment's time, if they'll put it up for a video about the campaign. We're going to draw lessons from this because it's really important for you to understand the lessons behind this campaign. You may not agree, you may look for other things, but I'll explain to you the reasons behind it. But I'm going to show you a video we did about this campaign, which I had to take off the States. I did it in about 2009, so it's a bit of an old video now, but it's in 2009. We're going to show that to you for a few minutes. I think it's about 7 or 8 minutes long, explaining what's going on behind with the mosque, and then I'll come back and we'll discuss and draw the lessons out of that. Okay, really important lessons. Can we show that video now? Okay, thank you.
In a democracy, how should a Christian confront things that are wrong? What is the Christian response to political issues around us?
Sorry, that's
what is God's way?
That's the wrong one. Can you take that off? It's the DVD one, please.
Hello, my name's Alan Craig. I'm a Christian, and
what I think you've got down as MMNT.
It's a mega-mosque that's planned here for East London. I love my neighbours and I care for my community. And the purpose of this video is to explain why this particular mosque is not a good idea. Thanks for watching it.
There are plans in East London to build the largest mosque in Europe. The group behind these plans is an organisation called Tablighi Jamaat. Little is known about them, so I wanted to find out more. Founded 82 years ago in India, Tablighi Jamaat has become Islam's most successful missionary group to date, with 80 million followers. That's more than the population of Great Britain. They operate in over 100 countries, and their annual gatherings in South Asia attract millions of people. Although they're well established and growing in the UK, France and elsewhere in the West, they're almost unknown outside South Asia. What is known is that they lead a very dedicated, simple life. They revere Muhammad and follow his example literally, even going as far as sleeping on the floor. But there is another side to their teaching, which is causing concern.
Tablighi Jamaat is a radical movement. It's always been associated with the sort of Islamist extremist movement in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, and they consider other faiths to be demonized.
Tablighi theology of isolation and segregation and saying that they are supreme and exclusive leads people towards violent extremism.
But it's not only the Islamic community which has expressed concerns about the organisation.
Over the past couple of years, in every major and many of the minor terrorist trials that have occurred, many of the defendants have shown either an interest in or membership of Tablighi Jamaat. Now, that is not to say that the organisation has necessarily sponsored these individuals. I'm not saying that for one moment. But I would be interested to know from Tablighi Jamaat exactly what their aims are and why individuals who are on the verge of being radicalised or have been radicalised feel so attracted to them. I think this organisation owes us an explanation.
The FBI says, we found that Al-Qaeda used them for recruiting now and in the past. A French intelligence report claimed 80% of extremists have been through the ranks of Tablighi Jamaat, describing them as the antechamber of terrorism. They are ambitious on a global scale. Dr. Marc Gaborio, Director of Research at the School of Social Science in Paris, describes their ambitions as a planned conquest. It's just these sort of security concerns which prompted Alan Craig, a local councillor in East London, to start a campaign against the mosque.
No, I'm very much committed to freedom of religion in this country so that Christians and Muslims and Hindus all can worship the way they want to worship. I'm not against Muslims having their mosques, of course not. But this particular mosque and the group behind it, Tablighi Jamaat, is my real problem. Tablighi Jamaat have very much a them and us attitude towards the rest of the world. They have links, quite clear links, with planned and actual terrorist atrocities here and elsewhere around the world. And their funding in the past has come from Saudi Arabia, and that causes quite a lot of problems. They want this to be their international headquarters, their global headquarters outside South Asia. And that causes us real problems here in East London. In response to Councillor Craig's campaign, a Tablighi Jamaat supporter posted a threatening video on YouTube. It featured Alan and his young family. It even had a link from the mosque's official website. The link was later removed, but only after the video received some negative publicity. Tablighi Jamaat claims it's a non-political and non-violent group,
and that the mosque is for all faiths.
It's not only for the Muslims, these services will be available for non-Muslims and non-believers as well.
The notion that somehow this mosque will be open and tolerant is a figment of their imagination. Their track record is one of exclusivity and of segregation and supremacy. That is the Wahhabi-inspired Tablighi Jamaat track record. And we should judge them on the track record and not on their rhetoric.
I thought I'd look at their track record in Dewsbury, where they already have a well-established mosque. The following is a clip from a BBC report and shows the impact Tablighi Jamaat is having today.
The presence of the Markaz has persuaded more and more of the Muslims of Dewsbury to join the Tablighi movement. Those who oppose its teachings find themselves in an ever-diminishing minority, their mosques losing worshippers. But its opponents say it has a them and us view of the world that's helped turn communities like this into ghettos. Certainly, the Markaz, with its no trespassers sign, doesn't seem to welcome outsiders. The secretiveness of this centre makes it hard to believe that its proposed successor in London will really be a model of openness and dialogue.
It's very dangerous because they try and keep away from other cultures and other faiths.
Councillor Craig is keen to make sure that this kind of division doesn't come to East London.
East London's a great place to live. We have people from around the planet living here, and all ethnicities and races and so on. And we rub along fairly well together. We do not need a large mosque that teaches separateness when we want to integrate. It's interesting that 2,500 Muslims have signed a petition against this mosque because they do not like what Tablighi Jamaat teach.
London is a key business centre and is hosting the Olympics in 2012. It's become the European hub for the promotion and recruitment of Islamic extremists and continues to be a major target for radical Islamists. This is a defining issue of significance in the effort to accept Muslims fully in our society without accepting Islamization of our society.
We are pussyfooting around with Tabligh Jamaat, and when you have such a beacon of intolerance, it will attract other people of similar bent or make them intolerant.
Help stop this beacon of intolerance. Please support the mega-mosque No Thanks campaign both financially and prayerfully and visit mega-mosque-no-thanks.com.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm sorry that the sound seemed to be out of sync with the pictures there. I produced that, or my colleagues and I produced that in order to take it off to the United States. The driving point of our campaign all the way through, and this is really important as Christians that we understand this, our driving point was the truth. The truth. We believed our purpose of our campaign wasn't to generate hatred of Muslims, wasn't to slander people or anything like that. We wanted to find out the truth about this particular group and get the truth out there. And we believe not only does the truth make you free, but if we put the facts and the evidence about this particular group and their plans for their mosque and so on, if we put them out and insist, despite all sorts of opposition from all sorts of areas, and people used to call us racists and Islamophobes and all the rest of it, put the truth out there, put the facts out there, put the evidence out there, without spinning it, without mucking around with it, put out there, we believe that the mosque would be defeated. And that's a particular Christian perspective. So the truth not only sets you and me free, but it has power. The truth is powerful. It opens up dark areas. It brings light into dark areas. And that's what we tried to do. And that video was part of our campaign. As you saw, we had a website, we used to leaflet, we used to have public meetings, we used to explain it. We had all sorts of opposition. And not only that bloke who put my obituary up on YouTube and so on, but all sorts of opposition to it. But all the way through is the truth. And it's a really important thing. We have the truth in Jesus. We need to speak the truth as Christians, and the truth will demolish strongholds, will pull down, open up, bring light into dark places, and will set you free, and will set me free. Now, time's getting on quite quickly, so I was going to talk a bit more about that, but I won't. We're going to come back to the mega-mosque campaign after the break, and we're going to have a look at that. Two more areas very quickly, which I'll go through, which I wanted to talk to you about, because I think they're important in terms of, they have lessons in there. And please understand from this, I'm not expecting any of you should become counsellors and take on a project like that, okay? That's not what I'm expecting. I'm saying in all these things there are lessons for you and for me as Christians which you can apply whatever situation you find yourself in. It can be leaning over the garden gate to your next door neighbour talking. The truth is really, really important at all times, okay? So that's one lesson from that one. So we're going to move on to another one now, which illustrates, as Islam rises, how the impact it tries to have on our society. I've been working now for 4 years with a wonderful Christian member of the House of Lords, the upper house in the Parliament, called Baroness Caroline Cox. I've been working closely with her, a wonderful Christian woman, great humanitarian. She's often out helping distressed and marginalised people around the world. As she says herself, she's now past her mid-70s, and yet she spends half her life in a desert or a jungle or some up in mountain ranges, somewhere like that. And I work with her quite a lot. And 4 years ago, we decided one of the real issues is Sharia law, Sharia courts and Sharia law, okay? Partly the problem with Sharia law is it's offering here in our society, remember earlier when we looked at the statistics there are 85 and more Sharia courts, Sharia councils in the UK, okay? So it's a growing way of life, a growing body of law that's running almost as a parallel legal system. You've got English law, which you and I are under, and then you've got Sharia law, which is spreading and moving out in Muslim areas. So it's running a parallel legal system, which means that some people in our country it isn't one law for all. There's one law for most, and then another law for people in Muslim areas. But particularly, we looked at the area of Islam's discrimination against women. And it's a particular area that Caroline Cox is interested in. She's fought for the rights of women around the world, and as she would often say, all this is going on around the world. How can I possibly go and fight for the rights of women elsewhere in the world if this is happening here in my own country, here where I live? So 4 years ago, we produced a bill to go into the House of Lords. It was going to tackle Sharia courts. You see, the problem with Sharia courts is Islamic law is biased against women. Proof. If you're a man in Islam, you can have up to 4 wives. If you're a woman, how many husbands can you have? 1. Okay? So there's proof straight off. If you're a man, you can have 4 wives under Islamic law. That's perfectly acceptable. You can have 4 of them. Okay? But if you're a woman, you can only have 1 husband. So that's an initial indication. In Sharia courts and under Islamic law, if you're a woman, your testimony in an Islamic court is worth half that of a man. So if I'm a man in a Sharia court and I say, that woman has done such and such, doesn't really matter what it is, I don't know, she's nicked £10 off me or something, doesn't really matter what the crime is, okay? If that woman wants to testify against me, there have to be 2 of them to say, oh no, I didn't. 2 of us say it. So it's biased against women. It's built into it. It can't help it. That's the way it's been since the start of Islam. If you're married and you want to get divorced, if I'm married to my wife and I'm a man and I want to get divorced, I say to her 3 times in Arabic, I divorce you. We are then divorced, just like that. So I wake up one morning, say, I've had enough of my wife, I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you. That's 1, 2, and out she goes. Well, anyway, the marriage is over. It is really over, okay? But if a woman wants to get a divorce, there are all sorts of hoops, and under some schools of Islamic law, she has to get permission from her husband to divorce him, okay? But whatever happens, she certainly has to go to a Sharia court, where she would go to a Sharia court, an Islamic court. She has to apply to it, she has to pay fees to it, and they will rule as to whether she can divorce her husband. That is what Islam is, and that's here in our society. That's what's going on. So we decided that actually we must do something to get pushback against this. We must do this. Women in our society now have equal rights. They've fought through the suffragettes and so on to get equal rights, but it's now become, in our society, women and men are equal before the law, okay? But not in Islam, and not in those areas which are dominated in the north of England and elsewhere by Sharia law and Sharia courts. So we have been battling to get a bill through the House of Court. Without going on the technical legal difficulties, it was tackling this whole thing about gender discrimination. And I worked very closely with her in the House of Lords, advising her and so on. It's taken us 4 years. And at last, the bill which we put in there, tackling this discrimination, got through the House of Lords just a couple of months ago and passed through the House of Lords, and it now goes into the House of Commons. But again, in an area which to me is fascinating, the whole area of politics, men and women before God are completely equal. Okay? That's how God sees them. Man and woman, he made them. We are all equal in the sight of God. We have equal worth in the sight of God. And we believe that's a Christian value, but also now it's a value in our society, that women and men are equal before law. And an area, therefore, where we want to get pushback against Islam in our society is this whole area of discrimination. We believe that Muslim women in our society should be equal before the law as well. Okay? And that's what we're working hard to do, so that they, within their Muslim communities, are treated equally with men. And that's what we're trying to do. Okay? Is that all right? Okay. The last bit, because time is getting on, I'm having to rush through this quite quickly. What I wanted to talk to you a bit about engaging, again, this is engaging with Islam, engaging with Muslims and so on. We've looked at the mega-mosque, and I've said there's a real Christian truth in there, there's a real Christian ideal in there. We need the truth. As Christians, we must always speak the truth, campaign for the truth, work on the truth, live on the truth. That's the center of it. Whatever you're doing, wherever you are, wherever you're engaging with Islam, the truth, because the truth will set them free, and the truth will demolish strongholds that are against us. Second, I've said in Sharia law, this particular illustration there, that actually we want to see women treated like men. God sees women the same as men, as equal value, and so as Christians we should as well, and actually our society does as well, and therefore we need to see that pushback too against that. As Christians, we want to see that pushback, and we need to engage with Muslims to ensure that that happens as far as we're able. The last area before we have our break, if we may please, I want to talk briefly about living in a predominantly Muslim neighborhood. I mentioned up there that I live in Green Street West area, which is a small area of Newham. And in that area, it's a fascinating area to live in. It's majority Muslim. And actually, whereas go back 50 years I know, because I know somebody who lived in our street 50 years ago. She's quite elderly now. It was almost entirely white Brits like me. In the area I live in now, the white Brits like me are down to 5%. And predominantly taken over by Asians, not only, but by Asians, and the majority of those are Muslim as well. I have no problem. In fact, my wife and I chose to move into that area 7 or 8 years ago. We're in the middle of this campaign against the mega-mosque. It was getting headlines, it was being covered by the press and all the rest of it. And we had to move from our previous accommodation. It was only about a mile away. We had to, for various reasons, get out of that particular house. It's in Canning Town, for those of you that know the East End of London. And we decided we're going to move, and we're going to look for a house, and we wanted to look for a house in a Muslim majority area. Okay? We wanted to prove to them that as Christians, we really didn't hate Muslims. We don't hate Muslims at all. And while I was campaigning hard and publicly and quite controversial against this mosque, I wanted to show Muslims, and we want to show Muslims, that we like them as people. So we decided we'd go and live amongst them. So 7 years ago, 8 years ago, we moved from Canning Town, if you know the East End of London, to Forest Gate, which was referred to up there as Green Street West, and we moved there. And it was interesting to see the response when people realized that that bloke who's campaigning against this huge mosque has suddenly come to live amongst the middle of them. But I have to say, and this was really good, the vast majority didn't bat an eyelid. But there were one or two who were quite hostile, and they got initially I got one or two people shouting in the street. But we planted ourselves with our family. We then had my stepsons living with us then, and our daughters as well. So the 6 of us, we moved right into the middle of this strong Muslim area. Because as Christians, we don't hate them. And we believe that we have the right to both reach out the right hand of friendship to all Muslims, to all our neighbours around us. The vast majority of people immediately around us, left of us, right of us, over the other side of the road are Muslims. Reach out the right hand of friendship and criticise this particular mosque. So that's what we're doing. We moved into it. And it's been a fascinating experience, really. We believe, of course, there's concern that there are some people in the Islamic community who are extremely hot-headed and can be quite violent, and we had decided we would trust the Lord under all circumstances. Trusting the Lord was the most important thing we could do. When that video went up, which basically was a death threat to me. It was in memory of Alan Craig, in other words, implying that I was dead. We had to take a decision. As a family, my wife and I had to take a decision. We decided, actually, we were going to trust the Lord. If we were doing the right thing by him, if we were doing what he wanted us to do, he will see us through. And so it proved. It wasn't always easy at a level. I didn't mind, you can imagine. You don't worry about for yourself so much, but if you've got young children, I have 2 young daughters. Of course, that was my real concern. If you wanted to cripple me, if the Lord was going to let anything happen to my daughters, my life would stop. But we decided we're going to carry on, we're going to trust him. The girls are going to go off to school, my wife's going to shop in the local shops, we're going to carry on with our lives exactly as we can. Trust the Lord, trust we're doing the right thing, what he wants us to do, and he will see us through. And it's been a fascinating experience the last few years, and just 1 or 2 incidents for you to know about. Firstly, the Muslims around us are friendly. It's quite remarkable. Every Eid, had their Ramadan, they have their month's fast, and then have their Eid. We will exchange presents. They will bring us presents, they'll bring us some of their food to have, and we will exchange presents with them. Similarly at Christmas. In fact, so much so, it was about 3 Christmases ago, there was a Muslim family over the other side of the road. There was a knock on the door on Christmas Day, and we were inside, I think we were eating our Christmas lunch or whatever it was, been to church, come back, have our Christmas lunch. And the Muslim family from the other side, they sent across this huge bottle of brandy. Alcohol, Muslims. But it's his way of reaching out and saying, we don't touch this stuff. But actually, I don't touch brandy either. And they didn't know that. But it's a massive bottle like this. I'm afraid I don't tell him, but I had to give it away because I don't drink it. But it was a real offer of goodwill from them, saying, we won't touch alcohol, but we think you Christians might, or do, or something. They gave me that, and it had a nice glass, cut glass, crystal glass thing as well. There's a real, at that level, there's a real friendship. And it is also true, remember we were talking about the happy multiculturalists at this end and the clash of civilizations. It is absolutely true that we see around me some impact of our society on the Muslim community. At the end of our road, there's a restaurant. And my wife came back roaring with laughter on a February 3 years ago, perhaps 4 years ago, came back roaring with laughter. There's a big advert on this restaurant. They're advertising St. Valentine's dinner and dance in the restaurant. St. Valentine's dinner and dance. A good Western concept, okay? But this Muslim restaurant was going to have a St. Valentine's dinner and dance. However, because it's Muslim, and they believe very strongly in gender segregation, it was an all-woman dinner and dance. No men invited. They were going to, all the women were going to get together. Now, I don't know what you make of that, but to me, that's a sort of interesting integration of Islam and Western society. They can have a dinner dance. Well, many Muslims don't dance. Some Muslims don't believe in music, let alone that. But they were going to have a St. Valentine's Day dinner and dance, but only women were going to go there. So the women were going to dance for themselves. And it is certainly true that the Western world is having an impact on the Muslim community. So in some ways, those over this side who say, "Oh, let it all happen; they'll soon integrate, and they'll become just like us in due course. We just stay patient." There is certainly some truth in it. But there's other elements as well. And some of you will have seen this, and I think one of the most obvious ones, the physical mark, is we have seen since we've been in Forest Gate the growth of number of women who are wearing the full burqa, the full face veil. I've got a friend of mine who comes from Bangladesh. He says there are significantly more face veils, burqas, in London than there are in Dhaka, the capital of Bangladesh. And Bangladesh, you know, is a 99% Muslim country. He said they don't wear the face veil there. Well, you get the odd one going out there. You may get some of them out in the villages, but in Dhaka, the capital of Bangladesh, you don't hardly see a face veil. Here in London, and certainly in the East End of London, you see them all over the place. And the sign of this is the girls who are wearing them seem to get younger and younger. It's difficult sometimes to know what age they are because they're walking along in this garment, so you have to sort of look at the body language and see how they're working, but they seem to get younger and younger. So the face veil as a mark of separation is growing, and a mark of a barrier between a Muslim woman and the rest of the world is growing more and more. The younger and younger the women are wearing them. But even there, you see the bit of I was sitting on the bus the other day, and I was sitting behind a woman fully burqa'd, and then she reached into her handbag, brought out bits and pieces out of there, and then started, through the slit in her eyes, started putting makeup on her eyes. Just like she was a Western woman. Just like you see many Western women are putting powder puff and the rest of it. But she was putting it through the slit. Absolutely, I couldn't believe what I was seeing, through the slit like that. She was putting it through there. So again, even there, we're having our impact, okay? We're having our impact. So it is certainly true. So you see that. If you go to Green Street, remember I talked about Green Street, if you go to Green Street, just near where I live, Green Street is an extraordinary area. Green Street to South Asia is what Oxford Street is to the North Americans, the Americans. Extraordinary street, full of glamorous clothes, lots of jewelry shops and so on. Extraordinary, real consumerism there on Green Street, but it's Asian consumerism that you see there. An Afghan family moved in, really nice family. They moved in 2 or 3 years ago. Just a man and his wife. His wife was pregnant. They were with us in the house for just under 2 years. When they left, they had 4 children. They moved in with no children, although she was pregnant, okay. Less than 2 years later, they moved out. Nice people, they moved on to some other property. They had 4 children. Sign of the demographics of all that's going on. 2 more stories I'll tell you, and this is not so much about, it's about the impact of Islam. Quite worrying ones, really. My children went to the local bog standard state primary school around the corner in Forest Gate. And when they started going to school, I noticed that actually on 4 days out of 5, in the school canteen, there was only halal food on offer. Islamic food. The meat was halal. Halal. I don't know why it's 4 days out of 5, not 5 out of 5, but whatever. For 4 days of the week, my children, if they were going to have any school lunches at all, had to have halal food. So I thought this is simply not acceptable. You know, I don't mind people having halal food, but I don't have to have halal food. There's no other food available in the school. So I started a campaign. And a campaign at the school. I went to saw the head teacher. I wrote to the head teacher. I wrote to people around the school and so on. And it took 2 long years before, in the end, the school conceded that while it's a Bangladeshi, primarily Bangladeshi majority school, that nonetheless, for those that aren't Bangladeshi, they need to be able to provide it. And so they now provide, at that school, they provide both halal food every day and conventional meat as well. But it has a battle. It's a battle to do that actually my own children, why should they have to eat halal food if they don't want to? Halal food that comes through normally the painful slaughter of animals and which has been prayed over and has a real religious significance. Why should my children have to? We have freedom of choice in our country, so it's a battle. Even more worrying, and I'll finish with this one, we'll have a break, even more worrying than that was at the same school, some years ago, Ramadan was in September. Ramadan, as you may know, Ramadan moves around the year. It's never exactly the same. But some years ago, when my daughters were at this primary school, Ramadan took place during September. So we'd had our summer holidays, we'd been away and we came back. And on the first day of school, which was probably the 2nd of September or something like that, it was a blistering hot day. 25 degrees or something, something like that. Very hot, sun shining, all the rest of it. First day back at school, and it was Ramadan. And this is a primary school, bear in mind, okay? It's not a secondary school, it's a primary school. And we saw at the school gate, mums were bringing little Ahmed or little Elisha or whatever, bringing them to school. And there at the school gate, the school authorities, the English school authorities, were being challenged. And their job, they admitted for them, their job was to ensure that the children of the parents, of the Muslim parents, the children had no water or food during school hours. And the school authorities were condoning that. The school authorities said, yes, that's okay, we'll make sure little Aisha does not have any water, does not have any food. Work that one out. Okay? It's a blistering hot day, 25 degrees. Little Aisha's out, age 7, is out in the school playground, and she wants a drink of water. The school, the bog standard secular English school authorities would refuse little Aisha, age 7, a glass of water on a hot day when it's a blistering. Why? Because we oblige, we go, because we're multicultural, if that's what they want to do, that's what the parents say, that's what they want to do, that's what we will do. I was horrified, I must say. I absolutely took it up with the head teacher, I took it up with the chair of the governors and the rest of it. I couldn't get them to budge. I went round to our local mosque, which I'm very friendly with, and I got the imam there to tell them this is not right amongst primary school children. This isn't in secondary school where teenagers can decide for themselves. This is primary school up to the age of 10. And so I got the imam to tell them, but that didn't make any difference at all. The English secular school authorities were enforcing fasting, no water, no food, on 7- and 8-year-old children, if requested to by the parents. That's where we had got to as a society, and it's really quite concerning. That's the impact that Islam is having, even on our secular authorities. I said to the head teacher, frankly, I think this is child abuse. I think if I went to social services with this, or went to the police, you ought to be had up for child abuse. Because to refuse little Aisha a glass of water on a blistering hot day in the playground, when everybody else around her can have it, their answer was, if Aisha was really ill or sick, we'd of course give her water and we'd send her home. Anyway, I've talked enough about this, but you begin to get the idea. I'm going to have a quick break for a few minutes' time, and then we're going to move on to something else. But you get the idea about engaging with Islam. At the root of it, and this is what we're going to concentrate on next in the next session, are Christian principles that you and I can apply when we engage with this rise of Islam all around us, and the impact it's having on our church, the impact it's having on our society as a whole. You'll learn in the future quite a lot more about Islamic theology, okay? Jay will be telling you about what they believe about Muhammad, what they believe about Allah, he'll and so on and so forth. He'll tell you about that, and he'll be filling you in with much more as you come in the coming weeks. What I want to do is just this engagement thing of a society and as a church, how can we engage with them more than just, although it's very important, just gossiping the gospel to do that. So we're going to show a video. It's about 8 minutes long, and then I'd like to discuss, you'll see 4 big points come up, and in the few minutes left to us, I'd like to discuss those 4 points. There'll be roving mics coming around, okay? So I hope you'll stay awake, watch the video, and come up with some ideas, and together we can discuss what lessons can we learn out of that. And I'll aim to finish by 9 o'clock so we can get away, if that's a possibility, okay? So we're going to have the video, please. The other one, is that all right? Let's make sure the right one's coming up.
In a democracy, how should a Christian confront things that are wrong? What is the Christian response to political issues around us? What is God's way? This is not the first time this question has been asked. You see, the great Christian campaigners down the ages had some important Christian principles which they held. They feared God more than man. They loved their neighbors. They spoke the truth. And they focused on their mission. Our own story starts back in 2005. The Sunday Times newspaper runs an article about a radical Islamic sect who are planning to build a mosque in West Ham in London, making it their global HQ, with a capacity of 10 times that of St. Paul's Cathedral. Tablighi Jamaat, the separatist group behind the mosque, are hostile to non-Muslims and see other Muslims as religiously inferior. They see women as possessions and use their mosques as platforms for promotion of their ideology. You're a Christian. You live near it. You're sure it's wrong, but do you ignore it? Isn't it only nasty racist people that oppose mosques? How can you avoid fighting the wrong way? But age-old Christian principles apply. They help us stand between 2 forces. It's not the do-nothingism of the politically correct or the hatred and despair of the far-right extremist. The Christian approach offers a more excellent way, and we will explore it together. Alan Craig, a Christian, did live near the proposed mosque, and he decided to set up the mega-mosque No Thanks campaign. The campaign was not perfect, but it's a story about how to apply Christian ideals to the fallen, messy world we live in. Fear God, not man. Having decided to stand up and oppose the mosque, things got harder as expected. The false accusations, name-calling, and even a death threat. But it turns out the most painful thing was attacks by his fellow Christians. And even his own supporters tried to pull him away from his vision. How do you avoid falling into despair or losing track of the plan? Can you be sure you're doing the right thing? How do you overcome fear of men? The way out is what people have always done. Go back to the call, the vision, the dream. What do you stand for? You'll need to be sure God would smile on your campaign. Wisdom always springs from fear of God. Right back on a winter morning in 2005, Alan faced the choice to do nothing or to act. A simple phone call from a senior church minister was a defining moment for Alan. It set in motion the idea that he had a moral obligation to act. Alan knew that God wanted him to stand up, to oppose the mosque, not out of hatred of Muslims, but instead to oppose what Tablighi Jamaat espouse and promote. This was the Christian thing to do. It's this confidence that God would be pleased that sustained him even when others wanted to take the vision somewhere else. Love your neighbour. In the heat of a campaign, personal attacks come from everywhere. On one occasion, a hostile young Muslim man set up a website making libelous claims and trying to link Alan to neo-fascist groups. This man lived in Alan's community. But Alan did the unusual thing, and to the man's surprise, Alan arrived at his doorstep unannounced for a cup of tea and a chat. But this was just the start. Alan sent him a card when the man's child was born. In fact, the goodwill started to go both ways. Rather than demonizing your opponents, the Christian way of love your neighbor is far more excellent. Of course, not everyone was willing to receive the right hand of friendship. The trustees of the mosque refused to meet. But respect for opponents and honoring their right to campaign was part of the DNA of Alan's campaign. After all, apart from God's grace, we too may be on the other side of the dividing line. This was never meant to be a Christian crusade against Muslims. Instead, it was to be gracious and civil, separating people from the ideology. Speak the truth. When you oppose something, the pressure to oversimplify may be tempting, but unless it's 100% true, it could undermine your point. Commentator Steve Emerson infamously claimed Birmingham was a no-go area for non-Muslims. His inaccuracy made him an international joke. It's an extreme example, but playing fast and loose with the facts in the rush to get the story out is dangerous. In contrast, the Christian campaigners researched their facts because Christians are people of the truth. Alan studied Tablighi Jamaat for 6 months before going public. He went where the facts led. You see, the FBI and French intelligence viewed Tablighi Jamaat as a terrorist recruiter. That claim can be bolstered by their known links with the Pakistani Taliban. It would have made powerful headlines from our side to call them a terrorist organization. The problem is the truth is much more complex. While it would have furthered our campaign, it was not fully true. The end does not justify the means. We must be true at every step. Machiavelli may approve of cutting corners, but Christ would not. The facts led to something more subtle, harder to argue, but true. Tablighi Jamaat are not a terrorist organization, and they don't advocate terrorism. But they are Muslim separatists and isolationists, and terrorism has sometimes been a byproduct of their separatism. You see, in practice, what happened in Mindanao in the Philippines demonstrates dramatically the effect of Tablighi Jamaat's ideology. There used to be good local relations between the Catholics and Muslims. But what changed? Tablighi Jamaat appeared on the scene and actively promoted their hostility to Catholics, and social barriers grew up. Despite calls against this from local Muslim businessmen who had lost business as a result. The same isolating effect had happened in Dewsbury in the UK. If Alan had picked the wrong argument for the sake of a good headline, it would have undermined the Christian integrity of the campaign. If you can't back it up, don't say it. The greater and more controversial the claim, the greater the need for cast-iron facts and killer evidence. The facts are checked, the message is clear, but it needs to be communicated. When it comes to anything involving Islam, most of your hearers feel like strangers struggling to navigate an unusual world, unable to separate myths and reality. They will certainly be skeptical of any political outsiders. When the campaign started, even questioning Islamic groups was unorthodox, and many Christians refused to engage in any debate about Islam. If we had any hope of bringing anyone on side, we had to be attractive and friendly. Words and tone had to be picked carefully. The name of the campaign itself was chosen carefully. The far right might have chosen a brutal "Stop the Ruddy Mosque," But Alan and the team chose the more respectful, mega-mosque no thanks. We had to persuade based upon values common to all. You must make sense to people of any faith and none. Christian jargon was to be avoided, as it made little sense to most people. The truth had to get out. Press releases were sent, and local media was embraced, whatever they say about you. The local newspaper loved to mock Alan, and even laughably put his photo in upside down. They ran stories sympathetic to the mosque, without acknowledging the other side. But Alan had to fight on, holding them accountable to their journalistic duty to report both sides. On one occasion, the mosque architect bragged that it would be larger than Battersea Power Station. This was an open goal, so a full-sized advert was prepared to be placed in the local paper. The money was paid and it was all ready to go, but at the last minute, through fear, the paper refused to run it and refunded the money. Undeterred, the team pushed on and printed postcards for every house in the borough with a feedback form on the back. Knockbacks will come, but the story must get out. Leaflets, debates and videos went out, all facts and no spin. Little by little, people came on board. Not just Christians, but moderate Muslims, atheists and others. The ice was thawing, and it was becoming freer to engage in civil debate. Stay focused. Building good alliances with others is essential, but we must be shrewd, focusing on what is right for the campaign. Many wanted to widen the campaign. Alan even got invited to speak at a large pan-European anti-mosque event, but he refused. Staying focused and saying no kept his campaign message clear. He was not anti-mosques in general, he was anti this mosque. It was also a good tactic to keep the far right away. Staying on your vision and not getting distracted was the only way to get things done. Fear God more than man. Love your neighbor. Speak the truth. Stay focused. In a democracy, how should a Christian confront?
Okay. I'm afraid we've only got less than 20 minutes to go, so we're not going to get all through this. But what I'd like to do really is to take these points home. We've got the 4 points, so they're going to stay up there. Fear God, not man, which we can also translate love God, not man, be awe of God, not man, put God first, follow God, not man. The second one is love your neighbor. Third one is speak the truth, and then the fourth one, stay focused on that. I don't think we're going to get time to go through all of them. Can I just ask, have we got the handheld mics? Are those around available, please? Okay, good, lovely. I want to start off with the first one. Let's just have a look at these. We won't be able to get through all of them, but let's just take the very first one. Who here finds it difficult to follow God and not man, to love God and not man? Who's felt themselves on occasion, nothing whatever to do with mosques, okay, but found yourself, man, your friends say go this way, and yet your conscience and your reading the Bible and so on says maybe go the other way? Who's got an experience where they've struggled with it? If you sit in silence, we're going to get nowhere tonight, okay? Just give me one or two stories about, okay, we've got a lady down there. So, okay, there's a microphone coming. Can you make sure you speak up so everybody can hear?
Yes, when I was young, I'm in my 30s now, and I was in my 20s.
Can you speak a little bit louder, please?
When I was young, I'm in my 30s now. In my 20s, I had a best friend who was half Muslim, half Christian, because her mum was Arabic and her dad was, her mum was Arabic and her dad was Christian, but Greek, that's it. And we were friends for a very long time, I would say about a couple of years, 2-3 years. But when I went to uni and I found Christ in my exploring of the Christian faith, which I had to go to different churches, I knew that God was calling me to leave my friends. And that's when it was very difficult for me, because I had to leave certain friends, certain people, certain places. And I was praying and praying, how can I go through life worshiping you if I have to leave my friends and even certain family members as well? that are overseas. I was the only one in my family who believed in Christ. Everybody else rejected him, and I was the fool, the black sheep, if you like, because of Christ.
So you went the way of Christ, and it was really quite costly for you.
Christ.
Very
I
costly.
chose Christ.
That's a lovely story. Thank you very much indeed. Anybody else who got this pull between? Because it happens to all of us all the time. Anybody else got a story they'd like to share about how they, or maybe if you're honest about it, how perhaps once you gave in and went the wrong way. Maybe you put it right since, but maybe you went man's way, went with friends or went with family rather than going God. We got somebody at the back there, have we?
Okay. Yes, it's just something that I'm currently going through with a friend who's Muslim, and she's. I've been visiting her. I went to visit her today, and so she's going through a lot. And when I start to speak about God, I sort of cower away and sort of say things like, "Well, in my faith." So I find that I don't sort of break through and share Christ with her, but she's in a lot of need and very ill, and that kind of thing is what I'm going through with her.
Right, okay, lovely, good. How do we know what God wants us to do? Thank you for that. How do we know what God wants us to do? How do you know in your life? Anybody, how do you know what God might want you to do? When you're faced with a situation, how do you know? There's a big silence there. Big silence. I'm sure you know how you work. How do you work out? What's the first way you could ever know what God might want you to do? Read the Bible. Or did I hear somebody say read the Bible? Oh, one person said read it. Anybody else? Is that the only person in this church that says read the Bible? Oh, sure. Perhaps you're just a bit shy. Is that right? Okay. So read the Bible. How else might you know that what God wants you to do? In difficult situations, you're being tugged this way and that way. Man, your friends, your family say go this, maybe I ought to go. How else? So you read the Bible, see what he says in the Bible. Very good. Okay, that's one. There's more ways. Okay. Somebody down. I'm sure maybe you were going to say, but somebody down here said prayer. Brilliant. Oh, I say we've got a praying church here as well. Sorry. So. God wants us to trust him. We've got over here, read the Bible. We've got down here, prayer. You're saying active trust in him. You trust him at all times. That's the way you'll learn his will for you. Okay, and so we've got three ways of doing it. Okay, any other way? Sorry? Fasting, another one. Fasting, thank you very much indeed. Anything else? Yep, there's a hand down there. Can you, because we haven't got the microphone there, can you shout out and I'll repeat it so everybody else can hear it?
I have often shared with quite a number of my patients, and I have been pulled a lot to say don't do that, but I found the Lord always has been very, very gracious. He's always protected me. That's all I can say. I found that he's always protected me.
He's a gracious God. He's an amazingly gracious God. And one other way, just before this, because we need to keep on the move, I'm sorry about this, is actually counsel. Friends, Christian friends, maybe your minister or something, going talking. You've got a quandary. Do I go this way or that? Is the world pulling me this way? Is God pulling me that way? The counsel of good friends. But always as Christians, and it's not just to do with mosque campaigns or campaigns against mosque, it must always be, the first one is to love God, to fear God, to stand in awe of God, and to follow God in Jesus Christ. And that always we need to be finding his way. But the second principle we've got up here is love your neighbor. Now, love is a very easy word. We can spread it all over the place. How do you love your neighbor? You're surrounded, aren't you? You sit in the street, you're in a block of flats, okay, so you've got 100 neighbors. How are you going to love them? I'm sure you love your mum, and maybe you love your cat, and maybe you love your best friend, or your husband, if you're a wife, if you're married, or your girlfriend, boyfriend. I'm sure you love them, but I've named 5. You're surrounded by neighbors, okay? And Jesus says, love your neighbor, and you've got 100 of them in your street, okay? How are you going to love them? There's a question. How are you going to love them? Anybody? Don't sit in silence. Please don't sit in silence. We've got someone over here, have we? Yep.
Yeah, acknowledge their existence.
Sorry?
Acknowledge their existence.
Acknowledge their existence. So you say hello to them in the street. Okay, that's a good one. A friendly face says hello to them in the street. Yeah. Get to know them. Yeah, quite difficult. This is the point I'm beginning to make. Quite difficult. If you've got 100 neighbours, yes, you can, but if you go a bit further into the next street, you'll have another 100 there as well. They're all your neighbours, so it's it's a slightly tricky question for you, quite deliberately. Okay.
Whatever you want somebody
but certainly acknowledge them. Certainly get to know them. That's all good ways of doing. Yep.
Whatever you want somebody to do for you, you do to them.
Absolutely good one. I like that one. Whatever you want them to do to you, you should do to them. So wherever you are, you should do to them what they do to you. Love that one. Very good. I love them all, actually, but we're going well. Yep.
Do right by them in difficult times
do
or
right
in
by them.
mischievous
Yep.
times
Yep.
or, that kind of, in wrong or dangerous times or that kind of thing.
Do right by them whenever you can. Yep. Sorry? Respect. I'm going to come back to that one if I may, because I think that's really important. One more over there. I think the microphone's just going round to that one, the last one.
Listen to your neighbors. Seek first to understand where they're coming from before you also kind of tell them where you're coming from. Yeah.
Empathise, understand them, see where they're coming from. Yeah, very good, excellent. They're all good suggestions. For myself, I think we'll hold it there because time is going on. For myself, I found the best one is the one mentioned down here. You've got 100 people around you. You've got 1,000 people around you. And at some level, Jesus tells you to love them. Now, you can't go up to everyone and put your arm around them and say, I love you, you're fantastic. You won't know them. But if underneath you have an underlying respect for everybody, or as C.S. Lewis defined it, you want the best for everybody, if that's what it is, you are then loving them. That is practical love. You can't meet with them, you can't talk with them, but if every one of your neighbour you respect them as a person, no matter whether they're atheist or Muslim or whatever they are, if you respect them as a person, as a human being created in the image of God, and you want the best for them, okay? You genuinely want even those that you don't like, even your nutty next door neighbour who's really quite rude and the rest of it, and shouts at you over the garden fence or throws rubbish over your garden or whatever it is, that person, if you love that person, you'll want the best for that person. You'll want them to stop throwing their rubbish over into your garden. I acknowledge that, okay? But nonetheless, you will not hate that person. You'll want the best for that person to do that. And I found that's really that's operational. You can then learn to love everybody. When I travel back on the tube back to East London, I can, in some sense, love everybody on that tube. Now, I won't go up to talk to each one of them and give them a sweet and shake them by the hand or hug them, but I can know in my heart that I respect everyone, no matter who they are on that tube train, and actually in my heart of hearts, I want the best for them. Does that make sense to you? And I think as Christians, that's something we can offer. We talked about the hard right, the people that really didn't want the mosque, and they generate hatred. They generate hostility towards people. Now, we don't want the mosque either. We didn't want the mosque, but we didn't want to generate hostility towards Muslim people. We wanted them to know that we respect them and we want the best for them, but neither did we want their mosque built either. Do you see the difference? Do you see the distinction? Okay, time's getting on. Third one we have down there, truth. Okay, truth. Speak the truth under all circumstances. Is it ever okay to lie? Is it ever okay not to tell the truth? Anybody? Can you ever tell a lie? Ooh, this one's a difficult one, isn't it? Jesus is the truth, therefore we need to speak the truth. Therefore, do we need to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth on all occasions? Right, okay. The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I have young daughters, okay? Should I tell them the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about female genital mutilation? I think not at their age. If you don't mind, I'm not going to, okay? They'll learn about it. So I think, how do we tell the truth? How do we know if we're telling the truth, okay? How do we know that? I think, and I'm going to cut the corners slightly on this one, I think the thing to be looking for is, do we have an honest intent? It's our motivation that makes it a lie. If I'm wanting to deceive my daughters about female genital mutilation, excuse that, ladies, but you know what I mean. If I want to deceive them, then I'm not being honest. I'm not telling the truth. But if actually I want to protect them and I'll tell them that which they can understand at their young age, then that is being truthful. So actually, to tell the truth, you look at inside yourself. not out there. You look at it inside yourself and say, why am I saying this? Am I making what I'm saying line up with the situation? My young daughters who don't need to know the whole gruesome details about that, them, but what is the truth out there? What does, because of this rather bad example, but female genital mutilation that I'm talking about, what is the whole story? And I think if you get your motivation right, that you want to tell the truth as much as you can, you've got an honest intent, that is telling the truth. And you can tell the truth at all times. And I think that is, you need to look inside yourself for your motivation. During that campaign, we could, on many occasions, we could have bent the truth a bit to make our story better, because I thought to ourselves, yeah, actually, I think we can up our campaign. We can stop the mosque if we push the truth, tell a bit more story, slag it down, criticize it, tell this. But we didn't, because we're Christians. As far as we were able, we made the facts fit the situation. Our intention was honest to tell the truth as far as we were able to. Does that make sense to you? Is that okay? So if you want to know you're telling the truth, as I say, in a court of law, you go there and you say that you tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and it's sort of out there. But actually a better measure for Christians is my intention honest? Does my intention have integrity? Does my intention to tell the truth, to love my neighbour, will I stand before God and tell him these facts and this situation? And that's really, really important. If you do that, that'll set you apart from the whole of the rest of the world. Okay? The rest of the world is out there spinning their stories, complaining, putting themselves up, raising themselves up on ego trips, dressing themselves up. They're all doing that, making themselves look good, telling stories, pulling other people down, trying to promote a particular agenda or a particular cause. They're all trying to do it. But if you're a Christian, you'll have an honest intent on all that you do and all that you say, and therefore you will be doing the truth. You'll be living the truth. You'll be following Jesus. The last one we had up there, very, very quickly, because we've only got a few minutes, and then I wanted to raise one more thing. So we've had there following God rather than man, loving a neighbour, speaking the truth, and then staying focused. I love and there isn't really time to discuss this, but I love the Hebrews chapter 12. I love this bit. My heroes, when I became a Christian, many years ago now, I've suddenly realized, I read lots of biographies and things like that, and I suddenly realized my two heroes of the whole, apart from Jesus, of course, my two heroes of all of Christian history that I could read, and all the Christian characters were two people. St. Paul, who you know about from the New Testament, and John Wesley, who was the founder of the Methodist Church, who lived in the 18th century. And the reason I realized, why do I really find these guys so attractive? It's very simple. They were absolutely, totally single-minded, absolutely focused. I mean, dear John Wesley, he drove on a horse. He rode 250,000 miles preaching up and down from Bristol to Newcastle to London and back and all the time. And he simply didn't stop, absolutely focused. He had one thing he wanted to do, was to preach the gospel and build the kingdom, absolutely focused. And for 50 years or something, he just rode around. He got married one time, he got married. Big, big mistake, because he left his wife and went off preaching. He was unmarriable, really, completely unmarriable. He shouldn't have married, and it was a big mistake, quite clearly. He did, and it was a disaster, okay? He was utterly sold out. So a bit like St. Paul, he should have stayed, and Jesus, he should have stayed single, because he was completely single-minded. And that's what I thought I really admire. And this staying focused is something important. That's what they did with their lifetime ministry, but even for projects, and that's whatever you do. And the thing that guided me on this is Hebrews chapter 12. I'll just read this to you because it's lovely. Staying focused. Hebrews chapter 12. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders, chuck it all away, don't get distracted, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. And I just think that absolute single-minded focus. Whatever you're doing for the Lord, single-minded about it. Don't get distracted, don't get pulled away, don't wander off. Just stay focused on it. Fix your eyes on Jesus and stay focused. Run that race that he lays before you. So I've given you 4 principles. I'm sorry it's been a little bit rushed. 4 principles. And they've drawn out of the mega-mosque campaign, but they're principles actually for when you're dealing with Muslims and actually principles for life as well. But there's one really important one that's missing. One really important one that's missing. Anybody would like to have a go? Yeah. Sorry, I didn't hear. Love yourself. That wasn't the one I was thinking of, okay? Okay, time's getting on. I'm going to tell you what I haven't put in here. Underpinning everything, overpinning everything is prayer. Prayer, okay? Sorry, I didn't have a drive. Thank you for making an attempt, but that's really what I was driving at, is prayer. All the way through, actually, you must be offering up whatever you're doing to God. We had people up and down the country praying for this mega-mosque campaign. They're praying all sorts of things. They're praying that it wouldn't be seen as a crusade of Christians against Muslims, because it wasn't. Okay, we wanted glory to be given to God about it, and there was a large praying organisation. I won't mention its name because they probably wouldn't want it, but they had people up and down the country praying. Here at Kensington Temple, you were praying for our campaign over years. I used to come here fairly regularly and report to you on the upset of it. And I believe it's those prayers being offered to God that have brought the success that we've had on that mosque campaign. Some of you will know that it was rejected by the local planning authority, that Tablighi Jamaat appealed up to the government, and the government rejected the plans for the mosque just before Christmas. They rejected them. And that was a major victory, a major turnaround, and we think that's by the grace of God. They've got big pockets, and they'll probably try all sorts of legal schemes to try and stop it. They'll go to the High Court, the Supreme Court, the European Court. They presumably they'll take the government there. I don't know what they're going to do. But there's been a real turnaround, and we believe that actually, first of all, it was prayer. Secondly, we think we did it Christianly, i.e. we loved our Muslim neighbours, we loved the Muslims themselves, we respected them, okay? We wanted the best for them, but we also didn't want this mosque built. And so we spoke the truth in love. I'm sorry this last session has been a bit rushed, and I've slightly overrun the time, but thank you for listening. I hope you found some bit helpful at least, okay? Thank you very much indeed. Islam is rising, but our response as Christians must be a Christian response to them. Doesn't mean we duck difficult questions, doesn't mean we don't confront and challenge when we want to, but nonetheless, we must do it as Christians. And I think if we do that, we'll set ourselves apart and distinctive. And not only that, but we'll get pushback. That actually through your actions, our Lord will reign. Jesus will reign. That's what we want, isn't it? Praise God, and thank you very much indeed. God bless you all.